Another example is many people don't believe that the Bible is real because, when you read things that go on in the Bible, it just seems impossible. You see floods and brimstone and fire. You see giants. You see great monsters. We hear about this created being. He's like has scales like iron. He breathes fire. It almost seems like a dragon. And we hear all these stories, and it's like, no, that's impossible. Walls just coming down because people are singing. No way. We read these things, and many people come to the conclusion is these are not real stories. These are just fake stories that people made to illustrate a point. And again, people are taking their own ideologies, their own philosophy, and then they're interpreting the whole Bible based on these things. These are really good examples of what not to do. We got our worldview, and we got God's worldview. Another example is we try to make Jesus fit into our own way of thinking. We like to say, Jesus was a Republican. If he was alive, he'd be a Republican. Or we would say, no, a Republican, get out of here. He's a Democrat. It's obvious. And then, so some people say, you capitalist. He's a Marxist. Come on. He wants equality for all. He wants everybody to have benefits and stuff like that. Come on, he's a Marxist. Marxist, come on, get out of here. He's a capitalist. You listen to his parables. He talks about, how we all need to make wise investments, free market, and we get these ideas and we try to fit Jesus we try to make Jesus fit into our own context. We try to make Jesus fit into who we think he is. I also hear a lot of people say that, if Jesus was alive today, he'd be in the high schools and, colleges handing out condoms. And I'm reading the Bible. I don't see that in there. And again, we try to make Jesus friendly for us. We try to make Jesus who we think he is many times. But Jesus is the critique of all human systems. He's the critique of it. And, he's not going to fit into our little ideology boxes. He breaks them all down. I think another example that we see is when Paul is exhorting the Corinthians. He says, I don't want to know anything from you except one thing, Christ, the crucified one. Not these other Christs that we hear people talk about. Not the prosperity Christ who gives us all of our dreams or wishes. You go in there, you make a wish, you rub the little genie, and then he comes out, you make a wish and he gives it to you. Not the triumphal Christ in a human sense. Not the Christ who will kill all our pressures and liberate us. Not the Christ that all human systems come up with. No, he's the Christ, the crucified one. What does this mean, the crucified one? What we regard as weakness, God regards as strength. What we regard as strength, God regards as weakness. It's totally opposite. To a Jew, a crucified Messiah is actually, it's a slap in the face. It is absolutely offensive. To a Greek, it's idiotic, it's stupid. The God of the universe, this great, powerful, cosmic God, comes into a weak human being and dies and suffers? That's stupid. That makes absolutely no sense. But this is actually the power of God unto salvation. What's foolishness to this world is wisdom to God. What's wisdom to God is foolishness to this world. Jesus Christ is the great critique that levels all human systems. Every ideology and every political system, every idea that we have, we think God should be this way and do this stuff, he doesn't do. He seems to do just the opposite. He breaks all of our expectations. If we follow Christ and not some ideology, political theory, philosophy, flavor of the month, flavor of the decade, or flavor for whatever school of thought you come from, then we need to embrace Jesus Christ, the crucified one. The Colossians were in danger of constructing their own Christ based on their own human concepts, as the Corinthians had already done. The Corinthians had already made up their own Christ based on this power and social prestige. Paul's trying to stop this from even happening. This is why we need to keep bringing ourselves to God as living sacrifices. The problem with, they say, a living sacrifice is tries to always hop off the altar. When we try to, oh God, I give myself to you. Oh no, I'm not doing that. It's so much. That's our life so much. We We always want to hop off the altar. We don't like God's way of doing things. We want to do it our way. But we need to constantly bring ourselves before God as a living sacrifice to Him. All these systems that keep us secure, all these things that make us feel better than other people, they got to go. We know that our mind is also full of idols. We're always pumping out new idols. We're like an idol factory. I mean, if we're not going to worship one thing, we're going to worship another thing, and all these things kind of seem to compete with God. And again, Christ comes and levels and destroys all these things. To follow Christ means that we die. To follow Christ means that we allow Him to level out all these things that are rising in opposition against Christ. And I like what Luther says. He says, every time you read the Bible, if it's your friend, you're not reading the Bible. Because God's going to tell you something that you don't want to hear. God tells me things I don't want to hear. It will tear up our false securities and our personal interests. We have our own personal interests. We want to do these things. God will tear it down. We have our own securities. We have certain beliefs that keep us secure. We like to listen to certain people because they say what we want them to say too. And Christ comes along and takes it away. That's not the way things work. No wonder people in general, all of us in general, we want a domesticated Jesus. We want a Jesus who plays nice. We want a Jesus who fits into our little box, and when he doesn't, when he hops out of our box all the time, we get upset with God. Again, Paul is moving on the attack. He's attacking all these false beliefs, all these false ideas, all these ideologies. Because again, all these ideologies, they're just human ways of thinking. They're very limited. Again, what's wisdom to us is foolishness to God. In the end, Paul is saying, stay rooted in Christ and don't depend on these inferior ways of the world. The whole issue is going to boil down to maturity. And Paul's purpose is to impart some kind of understanding in them that they would understand the mystery of God so that they would become mature. Because if they did understand the mystery of God, they would not fall into deception. But they would stay rooted in Christ. And they would not follow the inferior ways of the world. Are you guys getting all this? Yes. Great.